Shugor nakaslem jong unongsan Hima.
Ka Department of Khasi hapok ka school ba North Eastern Hills University haga jinge tre lang bat ka Khasi Author Society menta ka sngi ka arpulai tarik unai leber arajar arpulai kala penlong ye ka program ai jing hikai ba kerpang ne ka special lecture halor ka phang ka baong British Imperial Journalism kabala penlong ha kyang nang ba guest house auditorium ha ka ba menteri badai pet ye ka tanan arts and culture uba Paul Lingdo ulia don lang ha ka sngi ko mukongsan haringkat ka jinga don lang vice chancellor ka school ba nehu ki reo shampang gi bakin thup ya u khon kseu jong Thomas Jones u professor Andrew J May u bala shim ni ka benta ban batai penshai halor ka ni ka phang haba kren na ka sngi ko mukong san na ka liang jong ba Paul Lingdo u laong ba ki kot ki bala tho da u SJ Duncan ki I men CMU ban tho ki khana ba lingkot Namar ka jingnang jong Duncan ban penwan ni ki jingmot jong ki khana ka khring ni ki nong puli Ula keren ru halor ka jingdon jang ki reu krau hapo kari bat ka jaj ben reu ki bakin thum ye soso tham melung ubana ka shnong sora hagani ka sngi don lang ru professor DRL Nonglan HOD jang ka Khasi department nehu ubala penyat ye ka jingyalang haba keren ngri ka sngi na kalyang u professor Andrew J May ula ong ba ulayale akat bala na ka bor la de ban tho shapang ki khana jang ki breu ki badlong ki trash nong badru ki khana ki ba he bat ka jingle kumne kan wanra ka jingya dai hapdeng ki breu bat ki shnong ki thau bat ka ban penyar shu ya ka rukom ya tho ya ki khana hinrei ka kamram jong ki nong tho ya ki khana balarim kalong ban pet ne ki benta ba pher khnang ba an la ban pinshisha ya ki khana
I'm more a host and less a guest, but since I also happen to be in the government, I think that is why you invited me to be chief guest, whereas I could have been your chief host. We are in the August company of Mr. Andrew May. I met him just today, and I couldn't even find much about him because this morning I didn't even have time to shave. I had to rush to your cabinet meet at 9 in the morning. And coming to today's program was a matter of choice. I had to make the choice to be here. I belong to a profession, politics, a profession where it is dangerous to keep saying yes to everybody. At the end of a week, they'll say he's a yes man. Nor can I keep saying no to everybody. Then they'll say he's so negative. So it has to be a fine blend of saying yes and saying no. And I chose to say yes to Baroque when he called up to ensure that I'm here today. I had to say yes to it. Other members of this audience, beginning with Professor Duncan, I got to know him just once. We had shared lunch at a church gathering, Youth Sunday, at Mauple Village. Isnong Mauple, isnong Damba, Pinsto Lindo. Di Khot ini akan keren ke Youth Sunday, ada program ke Rush Coach Tank Step. Di Profesor Duncan buatkan menseni. Jadi kedua, berbang. In my inner circle, a musician and songwriter, Andrew Khot, huge. He's on Spotify. So am I, if you care to check my music. Andrew is the first name of my very good friend, and May is the month of birth of my mother, who is as fit as a fiddle at 70. She's born in May, so Andrew May, the two connect so well. You've invited me to a program which reminds me of Vajpayee. He said, a day will come when I will be ex-Prime Minister. But a day will never come when I will be ex-poet. There is no ex-poet. There will be ex-ministers. There will be ex-vice-chancellors. No ex-poets. No ex-philosophers. No ex-thinkers. You all are in that company. So it's a star-studded gathering, even before the sun goes to sleep. Baptisman, Karmaplan. I owe a lot to whatever I've learned, that I ever knew that he had, was that his Khasi is not as good as his English. And which is why a few of his poems were translated by Pak Biban. Yes. And Pak Biban's poems in Khasi were rendered into English very excellently by Pak Desmond Karma. And we should give him a big round of applause. Kompat is here. Well, I have a love-hate relationship with her. It's always been like that. But fortunately, she happens to share the same name with my mother, Kompat. I can't be disrespectful to somebody who shares my mother's name. Sarah is here. You're in the Department of Linguistics, isn't you? Yes. Sarah and I were together, batchmates, at the Department of English when we were at Mayor Branch. And I think I was privileged that there were just 3 guys in a classroom of 40 plus. There were days when the other 2 guys would be missing from class, and I would be the lone guy surrounded by a lot of girls. Luckily or unluckily, I didn't date any of them. I think it's fair to say that lucky. I would have loved to stay throughout today's event, but given the constraints of time and the fact that the budget session is on, I will not be able to stay, but I did commit Mr. Andrew that I would make sure that I watch his entire lecture on video. Please make sure that is properly recorded so that I can have, I can spend time watching his lecture. Life is full of ironies, and Mr. Duncan, your grandfather, right? Yeah. Grandfather, S.J. Duncan. Please read and reread his short stories. They are amongst the best written in the Khasi language. Ismo telah long kitab dah Shibun ke wit ke Hima kaji nang jemu nong tobat benuan di kanan Khot ke inspire yang nak mentor sitia di kanan Khot ke mendaki kuliah kelas 12 di ibu kenal mentan bah ni dan kami yakini we have friends with deep connection to imperialism. The 2 of them. 2 of them. If there are more, I will not know. So the irony of life is such that, we have two imperialists in a hall named after Namar, right? A major fighter against imperialism. So look at the paradox of it all. Two imperialists sitting very comfortably in a hall named after a huge anti-imperialist, Namar. It was not for nothing that he was sent to the gallows in 1864. Professor, you'll indulge me because I might take more time than you might take later. Seorang one step menaikkan seorang kadai lu kesenong try zaman. Email jomi kisah hamara kapan. Banyak julen aki syuting lang banyak sakai seorang. De nyabun inang seorang ni. Pada sedang melihat, right? De kuat ben rentang kerja tambah kat orang friend. Angin pen persiapan internalize. Dan sebelum berpinjau cikai nak ini, kibat keren ini cuma, pak ngaruh aku akan nang sebelum lagi. Ni dan yaki kaptu bat ni kiri perah ini kerja kerja macam ni. In a galaxy of names, one would be Susutha. Again, seorang bom. Susutha, Ukraine ni kini kentian, hakis ni belum betul. Ni haki pakisi, ayu ni le Namar kari. Ni haki pakisi, ayu ni le Namar kari. He wrote this in 1936. And only in 1964, those lines were repeated by John F. Kennedy. Ask not what the country can do for you, ask what can you do for your country. 1964. 1936, there was Khasi who said, we lived in other times. What will you do for your land? Just rephrasing. Kennedy, I'm very sure he's never heard of Susutha, but Kennedy rephrased Susutha in 1964. I mean, what better compliment can you give Khasi literature than that? Welsh connects to Germany along, it's so deep that during the World Cup this year, Wales had played in the World Cup, and before every match, they would sing the national anthem. So they were singing the Welsh national anthem, and somebody WhatsApped me. But how is it possible that the Welsh team are singing our Khasi anthem? I couldn't reply to him immediately because it would run into so many words. Most Khasis think that Rihasi is our anthem, and therefore the Welsh only copied us. Well, I think I've taken a lot of time, but before winding up, Ashwa mentioned, that premier snow in the attack from Shri. I think the program of Khot printed. Chief Guest Shri Lindo. Ladang yang pun berumnya ketir kasih harga sulit berperang dari India sedang tak bohong Papua. Sedang tak bohong Pakses. Bakrok. Ngai katanya dojong abjusha. Kila ada perlu panas sekejap emang. Apa nak begini? Jom boleh tu. Ngam dari Shri Lindo. Ngam dah buat banyak Shri ya kapan? Ngari Papua. Yo visi jom kita. Apa yang kan? Apa yang tembak ni? Shri yang lain yang ada apa yang dia ikan cuma ketiin kasih sedang nantak kompak andai pada masih dalam ni ngam suruh saya ngam juang simati ya menyokor ya kita jom tak kawasan dah kita form supporters syawang jom ke department, bagi department kita apa? Arts and culture, tourism, textiles, kini ni kilom, interlinked. Ni laban, smoba, tang ni dang kenapa? 1841 ni semua ni orang Shri. Mindandap aspas nem sa adu ajar software aspas nem om jong keketin cumi aspas nem jong written script cumi keketin cumi kalau ada nadu bagi na kita semai nang mimi ada mentangin pat ya ni jong tapi orang link cumi data language man kemeru man beri ketin kasih ketika man berkelongi man willpower berkelongi di research scholars ini nangis dia pendek kita mencuci itu department dan banyak an persiang dan lain ya kita terpeng ya jual ya long renyeng ya mai kacumi kacat tu isi akan terang cepagi naik lagi lagi kia betul beri pilih tip belum kita jadi nanti mau berhati lagi kia kita mengklaim keketian kekendau kekur keketian kekendau kekur sedang dapat orang yang tak boleh ni jangan halai kaki was new kan mau kita bawa keketian kekendau kekur pengklaimnya kita klaim kita angin dari yang selama ini dari ni dari tangki nong Japan yang yang kita sih orang Japan kan ya ingin kampung kalian bah ngidan ru karong ya ai ndi bang siapan kopi siapa hip hop cu kadui ya itu nong roai hip hop kalau dia mental lah roai hip hop nak kiri kasih kelas biang kakak cakap tak di publish pun pengayo banyak kendo ya bi
after Saint Andrew, the patron saint of Scotland. And I know some of you who may not have read my book will be wondering where does this all fit together. And we have already heard also invoked mothers and the importance to me of my family history. Were my mother to be alive, she would be 99 years old this year. And my grandmother lived, who was born in India here in 1891. She lived to a very ripe old age in her 90s, and I remember her very well, telling these stories of this family history. So passed down to me through my maternal line, and really in a small way, and I hope a kind of humble way, part of my work is an interest is to sort of do, to honour their stories, to honour their connections to this complicated history, this complicated past. How I end up washed on the shores of Australia, you might be wondering as well. Thomas Jones, one, was my mother's father's father. And in fact, Thomas Jones's son, Thomas Cattell Jones, married the daughter of Thomas Jones too. So I've got that connection as well. Thomas Cattell Jones went back to the UK, trained as a doctor, and came back to India, not as a missionary. In fact, the children of those two missionaries were very burned by the experience of their fathers and distanced themselves, in fact, and felt aggrieved at one level at the expulsion, particularly of Thomas Jones. So I've got a really interesting kind of complex emotional connection to this history. As was mentioned early on, and I accept that. I accept that moniker. I am a bit of a paradox. I'm very aware of my perspective as an outsider who doesn't speak the language, who hasn't lived here for any extended period of time. There can be a sense of disappointment, I think, that I'm not talking more about the Khasi perspective. In a way that's a function of those preconditions, of the fact perhaps the work I'm doing is ongoing and I come here to learn and to listen as much as to tell, if you like, and to talk about the importance of your perspectives, of local stories and interests. It's certainly not any disinterest on my part in terms of the centrality of Khasi language and stories and culture to Khasi history, and I would never presume to tell those stories for you. Our expectations, I think, are high of each other because we have this mutual interest, and the subject is important to us. From my perspective, I'm trying to do a number of things in a small way as a contribution to local stories as well as the bigger stories. And I think that's the one thing I think as an outsider that I hope I can bring is connecting particular stories in a particular time and place to broader interest. You know what it's like when we tell our own stories. We acknowledge that other people have stories as well. There are other histories of localities and places. We often focus on our own part of that. But I think the historian's role is to look at multiple perspectives, to make sure that as many different optics and points of view are taken into account when we're telling the bigger history. And history, of course, is about the present as much as the past. History, as one of my great mentors, Professor Greg Denning, wrote, cannot be divorced from the circumstances of its telling. So I can't help but follow my interest in this history at this scale that I do because of my family's connection to the place. And the larger scale because the legacies of empire are much debated, not just in the academy, but more publicly and globally across former colonised countries as well as post-colonial countries like the UK.
Ini program dah bangi hari ini saya keladai bangi Singapore ya kejengwan jongune o Profesor Andrew J. May sini si Shillong usaha tangkomba sitiau tamai bata pedeng kejeng bon kam jonggo ngira terpat daga Department of Khasi bat ka Khasi Auto Society baon wan ai ke jingkren hagani ka program ka bangi Khot kerpang yo nila penong kenang ye program kenang bangin yo sibun ki jingmentoi lagi jingkren ki jong Namar yetip ude yo nong tho history ba krau jong ka juk ka bamenta latip yo ha ka perthai bro kawai lapan mi ikikot ki badan kam na ka benta ka jingtip jong ni ya ka menor khamtam ha ka jingedai bat ka jing sosial jong ki phareng ya ka ni gari khasi jong ni ki jing tho jong ki long ki bom sha siliang na ka ta ka daw ngi sgodon kam ya ka ban thot ki jing kren jo yo bon kren ha ka ni ka program menta ka singi but ka wei ni ki kot ki ba ura tho wala pun mi ka snem arajar Khot ka bagarteng Welsh missionaries and British imperialism kadai ka tu ka kot ka ba penlong yangi bagi sodon kaman Khot yo Namar hangtung la yo bon ki jingtep ki ba mangi ngimla bantep bat ki ba kinong tho history hari India kim yo ki jingtep rei hakikot jong o ngimla ban yo ki jingtep ka jing thombor jong ki English nang ta ka jing sha thombor jong ki Khasi kumjuro ka jing le khrau jong ki English amdei tangi Khasi hrei yaki Welsh missionaries ki batre ya ki ri ke jongi Namar bakini ki Welsh bat ki Khasi ki long na kita ki judge benri ki bahasa secara po ki English ti hagini ke jing kren jong umenta ka sengiru rawan ra sibon ki jing tep ki bedai bat ka menor jong ka judge benri Khasi khamtama ko por berang secara ki English ti hagajing yakren nila yo ro ya kaban kedau ya kajing ya dai jongi bat ki English bakadan ka ji affair bat ka ji dai jongi bat ki Welsh ti une udai Welsh bat udan ha gajaj budai ka bahadu mentaru hagajing sai ki pat yo ya kajing lain loy na ki English tendrai let's say ngimla su ban dang mundur bat ki ka England kendang ai ka jing lain loy ya kari Wales ti kumta ka don ka jinga dai lane ka jinga sno kumana ong ak tinang way ka connection ka bakhamjan na pde jong Khasi bat ki Welsh ban ya ka jinga dai apden jong Khasi bat ki English namar ngi lahab ban ile persha ya ki English namar ka jing thombor jong ki but department jong Professor Andrew Jime Thomas Jones hagajing sya ulai rapi Khasi ya kapor sisa jong pareng Namar belai ba uni wan na kamta bani rapi kini ki breu ki ba sya leben hangni hari Khasi kumba ki Welsh ki sya leben hagari jong ki kapor ini sisa jong English ti kalong ru kajing sya ba katkum ka history ba Thomas Jones usha beben how when ki rang ba sipai jong ki English bakateng hi English but hadin kajing mi no na jong una commission ban trei ki kam imlang salang hagani ka ri jongi ule tengkhu teng e bat ki officer sarkar jong ka sarkar kamat ka British Empire bat nagata ka daw kim sultanat yo ni missionary ba de Welsh Namar bo yasha e kini ki Khasi ti ngi ong bakadan ka jinge pher ka bakrau ha pedeng ki ka jinge de jongi bat ki Welsh bat kumjuro ka jinge de jongi bat ki English ngi ladu sibon ki ai ki na ki jing sosial jong ki English rei kat tu kat ni ka bangila ban pau ka jing songo ye ki Welsh ka long ba khamtam ha be bat ka jing penyo e kini ki dak tho umdei e tang bo Thomas Jones marwai penyo i dak tho dai ka dan ro ka jing rap jong ran ba Khasi ya ko por na ka benta banwa wanra e ki dak tho Khasi